Man, expectation versus reality. This Sixers team is definitely dealing with some of that. I have definitely felt that in my personal life. Just real quick, we ordered a couch off of Wayfair. It looked great in the picture on the website, but when we got it, it was like a mini couch, and it just had this smell that just you just couldn't get over it. Even when you sat on it and laid on it, we ended up sending it back. But I just hate that when you expect things to be one way and then they end up being differently. Yeah, has that ever happened to you, Noah?
Yeah, the one example that comes to mind, I ordered I like some NBA retro jerseys, so I ordered a Hakeem Olajuwon Rockets jersey, and I don't recall whether the error was on my end or the seller's end, but I was expecting, something that would, fit an adult male, and I believe I received a youth medium or small. So I still have it. I didn't give it away. Thinking about it now, it'd probably be a nice thing to give to charity or something. That's
frame it up.
But
frame it up, right?
Yeah, because that's never going to fit me. I don't think that's ever happening. So the expectations and reality, disappointingly, did not align in that instance.
Oh yeah, the city of Philadelphia and beyond is buzzing like a hornet's nest. We are coming up on Sixers opening night, October 18th in Boston. The Phillies are looking like they could be a team with a little bit of destiny wrapped around their future. And of course, the Eagles are undefeated. So great time to be a Philadelphia sports fan. Welcome to the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmu Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, Ben Barry, super producing as he does. Here we are, Noah, finally arriving at the end of the preseason, stepping into the regular season here. Two big national games on the horizon. A little bit of an injury scare last night, although Doc Rivers proclaiming everyone healthy with a big sigh of relief and a laugh to go with it after the game. You were there courtside when Embiid and PJ Tucker collided a bit. Embiid looked like he kind of lost balance and fell into his leg and banged his head on PJ Tucker's shin. And then he went to the locker room. So everyone's got bated breath waiting to find out what happened. What was it like there in the arena when you were on the floor, Noah?
Honestly, I think we're all a little bit used to this Joel Embiid falling related incidents. And if we're being frank, there were 5 or 6 plays last night where you go, geez, for a preseason game, does he really need to be putting his body in danger in that way, sort of recklessly chasing after blocks and putting himself in tough spots? But yeah, for PJ Tucker, we know he had this arthroscopic procedure on his knee in the offseason and heads to the locker room with an apparent knee issue, and that raises real alarm bells. And if this was a worst case scenario, let's face it, it would have led to more second guessing of Doc Rivers' decisions as far as when he chooses to rest or not rest his key guys. But big sigh of relief, big proclamation from Doc Rivers that everyone is healthy. And yeah, we saw PJ Tucker head out of the locker room, warm up with his teammates at the start of the second half. He was sort of flexing the knee a little bit, but deemed himself good to go. And I have to imagine the Sixers medical staff felt okay about that opinion of Tucker's and was on the same page. So the main takeaway here is the Sixers are healthy heading into opening night. And nice that they went 4-0 in the preseason, but we all understand that's much less important than the health of these big players for their team.
Yeah, and you talk about Embiid going full bore. The Sixers had their projected starting lineup for the regular season out there here in this last preseason tune-up, and I think the moment where I realized Embiid was leaving it all out there is when he chased down Terry Rozier's layup and his follow-through on blocking the shot smacked Rozier in the face. That's regular season Embiid. Just going all out and leaving it on the floor. But I felt bad for Terry Rozier. I mean, in a different world, he would have still been on the Boston Celtics, and him and Marcus Smart would have been going at Embiid still. But it's tough, looking at the game and not projecting toward the regular season. And that was a type of game where Embiid came out determined and wanted to cook and was putting Plumlee, in the blender a bit.
Right. More deja vu with Joel Embiid with 3 early fouls for Mason Plumlee. I think it took less than 5 minutes for that to be the case. It wasn't as if Embiid was full intensity 100% of the time. I think both teams were more casual than they would be for a regular season game. The transition defense for the Sixers wasn't always pristine, but absolutely, I think you saw bursts from both Joel Embiid and James Harden that suggested, yep, when these games count, they will be ready to go. And that's all you can hope for, in addition to the health, which we are reminded time and time again with Embiid has to be of the utmost importance.
I want to zero in on James Harden and look at last night, but also project toward the regular season because it's creeping up on us here on Tuesday. And, I was encouraged by some of the shots that Harden took and some of the dribble moves, and the passing is continually, the vision and awareness is continues to be top notch. I was encouraged by some of the shots he made, but I was also a bit discouraged by the overall numbers because when I look at the box score, when it's all said and done, and I see that 6 for 15, that's the exact thing I'm hoping to avoid this upcoming season is games where he's not quite efficient or, below that 50% efficiency mark from the floor. And while I expect the numbers to be there for him passing and at the free throw line, it just bugs me a bit that he can't quite get to, 8 for 14 or, 7 for 12 as opposed to 6 for 15. And it's such a minute thing when you look at the grand scheme of things. But I think when it projects towards a full season, and if some of those misses are in the fourth quarter, it might give Sixers fans some pause about what level of James Harden they're getting this season. And I know it's the preseason, though. I know you're going to try to walk me back a little bit on some of that perspective. But is that something that is in the back of your mind or kind of makes you think about the way James Harden will play this year compared to last year and the improvements we're hoping to see with his game?
I guess I'd have a slightly different angle on it in that I'm not generally looking at field goal percentage. I'm more looking at like points per shot attempt. And James Harden, time and time again, has been exceptional in that category, even last year when the field goal numbers dipped. But yeah, last night, in a preseason game where perhaps he's not throwing himself into harm's way as much, not drawing many free throws, and therefore 6 for 15, even with him knocking down multiple three-pointers, is not going to translate to an especially efficient night. So I think for me, it is going to be interesting to see if he draws free throws at his normal rate still. I think if you're looking to be pessimistic there, you've got some reasons to be last season. Just in terms of in an elimination game, him being unable to draw those free throws the way he's accustomed to. And I think there being a few games last season where the frustration on his end was very visible and palpable. And you wonder whether that is going to be a significant downside of his game aging, just not being able to get those free throws. I don't expect a steep decline, but if there is some sort of significant decline, that's a big deal because that is a hallmark of who he is as a player and what makes him so good and why, by and large, 6 for 15 for him or 6 for 17 often doesn't mean a bad offensive night. So that's a big thing to watch with him this season, and just whether he can maintain efficiency without having to be a world-class shooter in terms of field goal and three-point percentage.
And let's project toward the season a bit. Are you expecting Harden to be like this upper echelon number 2 to Joel Embiid? Are how high are the expectations for him, for you, above where he was last season when we're projecting toward what he's going to contribute toward, being Joel Embiid's complement and, creating opportunities for guys? How far above his clip last season are you expecting him to be realistically this upcoming year?
I think he'll be better. I don't think he'll be dramatically better, except perhaps there will be some of those throwback nights that we've talked about sprinkled in. But I think numerically, 20 and 10 should be doable for him. I don't think he'll be clearing either of those marks by very much, but I think he's capable of it. And I think the efficiency will be comparable to what it's been in years past, and maybe be slightly different in terms of fewer free throws. But I think he does look a little more comfortable with the catch and shoot threes, gotten some practice at that. And so I think maybe the 3-point percentage rises, is a little more successful at creating separation for the step backs, at getting to where he wants with his drives and shaking guys with the crossovers. And therefore, yet again, it's 20 and 10-ish for James Harden. But I think Tyrese Maxey inevitably is going to assume a very large offensive role here. And so I don't foresee James Harden scoring 25 points per game. And I think the Sixers won't need that, but they'll need those 20 and 10 to be efficient, to be smart, to not include careless turnovers, and for the defensive effort, of course, to be consistent and to be solid in big games. So that's kind of the ballpark of what I'm expecting from him. I think it'll be a better season, but I think it's unrealistic to expect some sort of huge resurgence on his part. I also think it's important to note that he was by no means a horrible player last season. I think he was just a little worse than some folks were expecting because, of course, he's a huge name, one of the best 75 players of all time. And he didn't deliver in games 5 and 6 when the Sixers would have loved that because their number one star was playing through these really key injuries. And James Harden, if he stepped up there, maybe the Sixers, are able to get by the Heat. So I think an improved season is in the future for him, but I'm not expecting massive, startling improvements from James Harden. And I think that should be okay for the Sixers. I think they should be able to manage if he's just a slightly better player overall than last year.
I think when you look at the big picture, Daryl Morey and company have done an incredible job of walking this fine line of bringing in players who make James Harden more comfortable, who he's familiar with, and Harold, Tucker, Daniel House, but also providing the team with great role players who can fit with this squad, whether Harden is here or not, or whether he's playing at his best or not. So while I'm hoping that he is the number 2 that we expect, I'm fully prepared and anticipating Maxey to assume some of, that star role next to Joel Embiid. Like you mentioned, Noah, it's going to be interesting, seeing where that, falls. But I just have a real microscope on James Harden out of all those starters, out of all those people. I mean, PJ Tucker's 37, seeing him hit the floor in a preseason game and Joel falling into him is like the worst case scenario in my mind. But Father Time is undefeated, as they say. And when I'm looking at Harden, I'm just reminded of instances and situations in the past when the Sixers have gotten, bona fide stars, but when they're aging and past their prime and don't get the benefits of what they brought to the NBA. So I don't want to be stuck in that situation again where the Sixers are trying to justify or, to kind of sell an idea or bill of goods that's not quite reality with what the product is on the floor. And it's the landscape of the league and the landscape of the Eastern Conference that you're trying to compare to. So while Harden in actuality might still have, gas left in the tank, is it going to be the best fit for the team? Is he going to be exactly what the squad needs in order to get over the hump? Because so many people I talk to, so many fans, even experts project past the regular season to what the Sixers are going to do in the playoffs. And we talked about the journey being part of the destination, but the expectations with this team just continue to be, in the sky and really high, and hoping that the Sixers can finally get over this hump. So it's tough not to focus specifically on that and see where he falls in them getting to that point. Of course, it's going to deal with matchups. Of course, it's going to, depend on health, but they have to be better than the Bucks, the Heat, the Celtics, those other teams that they're fighting for those top 4 or 5 seeds in the Eastern Conference. So I think that's really where my focus is with him. And yeah, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I'm focusing the intensity a little too much on Harden, but I thought that Ben Simmons was a virtuoso talent, and they had a chance with those number 1 overall picks to build something that would make you feel like, you got Victor Wembanyama in here or something like that, like that the future was bright and that they were projecting and going towards something. But, I can't fall back off of that just because I want to be fair to Harden and his aging process. Like, fans are thirsty for a championship. They're thirsty for relevancy and not lowered expectations or being in the doldrums again. So I kind of relate to a lot of that when I'm projecting toward what Harden's going to give us and the expectations I have for him. So it might be a little hard, a little lofty, but I'm focusing my attention on what he brings and if he's going to be able to be, what the Sixers need to be better than those other teams.
Yeah, Eastern Conference looks really good, and I think the consensus is the Sixers have put themselves in a decent position to win it, but that a lot's going to ride on Harden. So I think everything you say there is super sensible. But yeah, I mean, we all knew that trade of Ben Simmons, whatever it was, going to be a defining move for Daryl Morey. That's why he spent so much time considering the options and negotiating and letting that saga drag out. And we all know he was very pleased when James Harden became available and a reunion was possible. I think he's done very strong work trying to complement Harden and Embiid as well as he can. I think you look at past Sixers teams, and probably for fans, it was really frustrating, the lack of shooting around Embiid. I think for Embiid himself, he admitted he wished he had more shooting around him at times in the past. Seeing Embiid having to share the floor with Al Horford wasn't much fun. So I think from Daryl Morey's perspective, the supporting cast, it's a lot better, but the NBA is a star-driven league, and number 2 stars matter a ton when they're James Harden and you made this huge trade to acquire them. So the pressure on him is fair. I think the Sixers understand and embrace all of that, and they're not shying away from they want to win a title. So we're again in a position where anything besides a very deep playoff run, I think it's disappointment. That the talent is there to make that happen, and we're almost about to be, at that time where that's going to be tested, and we'll see how it all plays out.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilMU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
We will see how it all plays out. Are you do you have a prediction or an idea of where they'll finish ruminating inside? Does it matter where they finish as much? They're going to have to face difficult teams either way. We've seen them be a great home team in the past and then kind of fall off of that a little bit from where they were at one point. Are you looking for them to have to get home court advantage? Are you projecting that far out as to, which teams they might match up best with, or what are your expectations when it comes to how they'll play and win totals and things like that?
Yeah, I would be surprised if they don't get home court. They even did last year
Mhm.
playing without Ben Simmons and having to navigate all that. Won 50 games last year, so I think something in the low to mid 50s feels about right for me, even with how good this conference is. I just think the enhanced depth means they'll be able to navigate adversity a lot better. And I think I buy into everything they're selling for the most part with the toughness and the defensive improvements. I think there's just a lot more margin for error here where it's okay if Harden has an off shooting night or if Maxey's a little passive or if Embiid has to miss a few games with a minor injury. They've just got so many good plan Bs, Cs, and Ds this year. So I think probably the number 2 seed in the East would be my current call. Of course, there's a lot of guesswork involved there, but right now that feels like how it's going to play out to me. And then I think in the playoffs, yes, super matchup dependent. I can't pretend to know, who's going to be the 7 seed and what have you, but gut feel right now is they do finally get beyond the second round and that they lose a very entertaining, physical, grueling conference final series, probably to a Milwaukee or a Boston in 6 or 7 games. As you say, James Harden, the spotlight's on him in that kind of series. And a lot of these teams are super versatile and switchable and physical. And the Sixers are better equipped to deal with all of that. But yeah, there are some major question marks having James Harden as your number 2 star. And therefore, I imagine a lot's going to fall on Tyrese Maxey's plate in those series. I think he's going to be up for the task for the most part, but they're going to be asking a lot of someone who's going to turn 22 years old during this season. And maybe that hurts them in some of these games where Maxey, has some difficulties in the playoffs. So that is the current read on it from me. Not pretending to have a crystal ball, but there it is. I'll put it out there and we will see if that is anywhere close to accurate.
I am anticipating that there will be a few road bumps as the team tries to gel to start the season. I'm lowering my expectations a bit of them being, rolling over Boston or Milwaukee here to start the season or any of those other tougher games. I think those games will definitely be dogfights, so to speak. I just don't feel like you can play 21 games or whatever it was last season with James Harden plus the playoffs, bring in PJ Tucker and expect that nucleus to gel, over an off season more so than teams like the Bucks or the Heat or Celtics who have a stronger nucleus. So like, the Celtics, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, that core is a bit stronger than what the Sixers core would be of, and we're talking about, longevity and length of time together. Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey. Of course, Harden would be a part of that nucleus, but he hasn't even been here long enough to be, someone who has as much, time invested with these guys playing together. Yeah, him and PJ Tucker have a lot of time invested, but not on this team, not together with this mix of players. So I feel like I'm giving them time to make it work. How long that'll take, 10 games, 5 games, 2 games, I'm not sure. But I'm lowering my expectations a bit to start the season. Now, as the season progresses, I'm right there with you that this is a team that should be formidable enough and connected and gelled enough to be able to compete and be just as good as any of the other top teams in the East. So I think they'll be in the top 4. That would give them home court, top 4 when it comes to the playoffs. That would give them, home court advantage. How it plays out after that will be interesting, and I think they will get past the second round. I'm going to give them the extra push past the Eastern Conference Finals because I just don't see how you just get past the second round, and I don't think that'll satisfy fans, and I think it will cause Daryl Morey to do things in the offseason to continue to improve the team, and I think that that won't be a great scenario for this team to continue another offseason where they're rehashing or, bringing in pieces or moving things around. So I'm hoping that it's a top 4 seed. I'm seeing them as a team that can get as good enough to get to the NBA Finals, and I'm hoping that that's the truth of the matter. But I'm a little unsure because I'm definitely, my attitude is like the state of Missouri. Show me. I'm more like the show me state. But I am glass half full in what they're going to do this season. But I'm trying to stay focused in the regular season, not project as far as the playoffs and, what have you done for me lately attitude, because I feel like it's a little unfair to ignore all the steps that it takes to get to that point. So that's what I think. Now, do you feel like Joel Embiid is focused or will need to be, or, putting effort into defending a scoring title or playing at that clip, or trying to push for MVP awards? I know what he said at the media day and how he's focused more on winning than the individual accolades, but that just doesn't go away just because you say it does. You know what I'm saying? He's spent so much time pushing for those things, defensive player of the year and things like that. I think that still is a part of his makeup, but how do you see it?
Well, I don't think scoring title is a big deal to him, especially now that he's checked it off. And I do legitimately think a lot of that last year was just a byproduct of the team. We even saw early in the season, it wasn't so ludicrous that he was sometimes playmaking in transition. Now, when he's doing that in preseason games, you think, right, just, get the ball to Tyrese Maxey or James Harden or D'Anthony Melton.
Yeah.
But I think this year, in terms of scoring, he shouldn't need to carry quite as large a load, and I wouldn't imagine he's going to care about his scoring to the decimal point. I think the MVP, yes, he understands it would be best if that's not constantly keeping him up and in his mind, but it's meaningful. It would be a really big deal to him if he won that award. And if he plays well enough such that he's in the conversation in the middle of the year or late in the year, I find it hard to believe he's going to successfully ignore all of the discussion about that. And I imagine if he's asked, he will reluctantly share his opinions and feel that he merits it in all likelihood. But I think Joel Embiid, you ask about focus, that's not something at this stage that I have any concerns about with him. I think he's proven he's one of the best 5 in the league, has been for a couple years now, and he's a big-time player. So I don't think he's a question mark for this team in anywhere close to the way that James Harden might be. Although, again, the personal opinion on my end is maybe that's a little overstated with Harden just because he's not coming off a terrible year. It's just a question of whether he can elevate himself a little further this time around. But I think we should see the Joel Embiid that we've seen the last couple of years, and maybe he'll pull out some new tricks, as we've talked about before, to counter some of the swarming defenses. I think for him, he understands that he needs to be a better defender and wants to be locked in and doing an elite job as a rim protector in fourth quarters. So he's capable. Let's see if he improves in that regard. If he does, NBA Finals, I think, looks a lot more realistic for the Sixers. If we're just talking about an all-world Olajuwon-esque sort of defender for the Sixers in the playoffs, in addition to, oh, by the way, the scoring champion last year, then yeah, this team can win the East for sure.
Yeah, I think you made some great points. And the one thing I've been taking away from this early going that I hope Joel can pick up on, and, styles make fights, and I think Montrezl Harrell's game and the way he plays around the basket is something that I really hope Joel Embiid can grasp, because I feel like a little bit sometimes too much finesse in this game, a little too much of backing away from the size and strength that he has around the basket. So sometimes he'll get in the paint and try to draw a foul or, pump fake instead of going straight up, when I'm like, you're still the biggest guy on the floor, creating the contact, not necessarily hunting fouls, but the physicality of under the basket that Harold displays of, the offensive rebounds and going straight up and finishing at the rim with two hands. I think some of that is what I want Joel Embiid to adapt. And, that's just me thinking, his game is his game, and what he brings is otherworldly when it comes to someone of his size and the versatility that he brings. But I just feel like there's more, strength around the basket, maybe, imposing his will that is still a little bit of that's on the table that he can, add to his game. But I think you nailed it, that a lot of what he's bringing is, no other team can really plan for. And it's just really how he's going to adjust to the intensity defenses are bringing and finding players out of double teams. And if he can continue to ratchet up his level of play in that regard. So, I don't have any qualms or suspicions that Joel will be any different than he was last year. I just want him to continue to improve and evolve and be even more dominant around the basket, because like you said, some of what his game is the unpredictability of him bringing the ball up the floor. And, instead of power into the basket, he's hitting drop step fadeaways and things like that, or, trying to draw contact and killing you at the free throw line. So that off balanceness is part of his game where, guys of his size in the past and other versions of the NBA, like Shaquille O'Neal or whatnot, you knew Shaq was going in the paint and going to try to overpower you, but it was more like a dare you to stop me type of thing. So I feel like the Embiid can add some of that to his game and spend less time, shooting jumpers and things like that, which sometimes he leans on too heavily. But my expectations of him continue to be through the roof. And I feel like losing some of that focus on the MVP race and those things tend to attract them to you even more in some sense, because it just comes more naturally and in the flow of things. So I think I'm looking for Harden to be more efficient, and Embiid to continue to be what he was, but maybe be more dominant around the basket. Maxi's taking a step forward. Tobias Harris and PJ Tucker, I feel like, are getting adjusted and will kind of be, trying to figure out things with their roles changing a bit. Although Tobias can let it fly, like he said, and just shoot the basketball. And I think that will solve a lot of, his concerns. But I'm really optimistic going into the season. I'm hoping they can continue to gel and become better, because I am dead set on believing that the level of basketball that was played by the Final Four teams last year was not a level of basketball the Sixers were playing at the end of the season. So to get to that point, it's going to take a lot of steps along the way.
Right, and at least they have a full season to do it this time around, assuming there's no dramatic deadline deal in store yet again. So that should be helpful. With all this discussion, I can't help but think back to the 2019-20 season, where expectations were similarly high, and a big part of that was, again, a veteran pickup renowned for his veteran savviness and specifically his success against the Sixers and against Joel Embiid in the playoffs in Al Horford. And I think many folks were optimistic about that team because they thought Horford's versatility would have this really widespread impact. And I do think many of us are projecting similar things with PJ Tucker, although I think perhaps not quite as much is expected of Tucker compared to Horford in terms of, certainly the scoring, certainly, playing just quite that many minutes and being that big a deal. But you do wonder whether all of the things you mentioned will come to fruition. I think realistically, one or two folks might fall short of expectations. Maybe it's Tobias Harris. Yes, he's putting up more catch and shoot threes, but he's not shooting them very well. Maybe it's James Harden. Maybe Joel Embiid, has an unfortunate injury break at some point here, and the backup center play is interesting, but not at Joel Embiid caliber. So, yeah, there are ways this could go wrong, but I do feel solid at least that the Sixers' various contingency plans are pretty decent here. I think they've just got so many options to counter difficulties they're probably going to encounter this season, and therefore, okay, maybe my call of the second seed and wins in the 50s doesn't happen, but it's just hard to imagine a worst case scenario where this team is in the low to mid 40s with wins and isn't getting home court advantage in the playoffs. I think that just does feel like such a likely outcome given the roster construction here.
Speaking of roster construction, a couple of thoughts before we get out of here. Doc Rivers saying the 9-man rotation is probably the way things will go when the season starts. Are you surprised by that? Do you feel like he's selling some of the players short? Do you see the vision that they're working with? What was your perspective on that?
Not surprised. I think he continues to frame everything as very fluid, and I do buy that because there's so much to work through here. Mm-hmm. So not just how many guys you have in your rotation, but which duos do you like, who plays best with each other, how much do you want to lean on the Houston connections, Tucker and Harden, Harrell and Harden, versus trying to develop some new chemistry with, intermingling these pieces. I think those are all questions that haven't been anywhere close to answered yet. So there's got to be some experimentation here. I think in all likelihood, we will see that go beyond 9 for some games. But I buy right now that 9 makes sense because it's not smart to play everybody and have guys playing bits and pieces sort of roles. You want them developing real chemistry and continuity, and you can't do that if you play 12, even if you have 12 NBA quality players on your roster. So I expect a lot of twists and turns there, though, but it does look like that's how it's going to play out, that some of these internal guys with Thibault and Korkmaz might not be seeing the floor much rotation-wise in the early stages here.
This just in from Sham Charania, the Sixers are waiving Isaiah Joe and Charles Bassey. Just coming an alert across my screen. Instant reaction, Noah, before we get to those guys. I guess the 4 off the bench will be Melton, Reed, House, and then who would be the 9th man?
I think George Niang in there.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, Reed wasn't the guy last night. It was Montrez, but obviously.
Oh, Montrez, yes.
That appears like it's very fluid is again the word. That's interesting with
Joe and Bassey.
Joe and Bassey, yeah. Neither played last night. So both Daryl Morey draft picks that showed some promise here. And we'll see what's coming down the pike for the Sixers.
So that gets us to 16 players in the roster?
So, yeah, I mean, they didn't have to waive both of them. I believe the Sixers, would have been okay choosing between one of the two. So now we'll see if there's some sort of addition coming or how things change before, the start of the regular season. But Isaiah Joe and Charles Bassey, I do think they both have NBA futures. There just wasn't a clear route to minutes for them here in the near future. So that is clearly part of the logic. And then there's some things that we're probably going to learn here coming down as far as how the rest of the roster does shape out or whether there's anyone coming in. But heading into the preseason, it looked like it was going to be Joe, Bassey, or Queen, one of the three. And now apparently all three have been waived by the Sixers.
Hey, we are never going to waive you, and we appreciate you giving us a starting shot. We are the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works Tuesday, October 18th in Boston. Noah, are you heading up for opening night?
I will be there. Yeah, I'll be at TD Garden, and should be fun. Should be a good one.
Oh, yeah. I can see the juices flowing right now. I can see the goosebumps popping up. Noah sizing things up. Hopefully we get what we expect this season from the 76ers. But either way it shakes out, the Sixers Talk podcast will be here every step of the way. For Noah, I'm Danny and Ben Barry. We will see you next time. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching.